The biggest thing you gave me was time.
I've always been a proponent of do the job, do it well.
When you're a family, everyone in the family has to be treated with respect.
I couldn't have done this without you. Coming here to K-State, you've been my confidant and in the room with me.
I want to know who you really are, right? You could put whatever you want on paper, but that doesn't really matter.
His teachers, they meet the learner wherever he is.
They don't care what you know.
Until they know how much you care.
Be aggressive. Let's win. Here we go.
It's been great since to be able to integrate some of the things that we do in different programs, some of the things that leaders deal with, to be able to share it with the young coaches and young to-be administrators. And so it's great. And I really appreciate you giving your time to us for this moment.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me and thinking about me.
Good. Well, of course, the Houston area is dear to my heart. If I didn't have someone from the Houston area on, my mom would say she would not listen to the podcast. She would not watch it anymore. So,
like your mom already.
Yeah, that's right. We had to get you on. So, what I like to do is I like to jump right in, and I like you. This is a story moment. And I say to my kids sometimes when they start to talk, when it's someone else's turn, it's not your moment, right? So, Tommy, this is your moment. And what I'd like to ask you is to take us through the journey that you had to take to now becoming the vice president and director of athletics at Rice University.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back, you have to think about where, if you think about growth and where we are, where was the seed planted? And I think the beginning of that would be that I grew up in a home that my father, although never played sports at the collegiate level, just played in high school and then had a career working for the United States Department of Agriculture, actually. But I grew up in a highly competitive environment. My dad instilled a level of competitiveness in his children that if we're going to do something, let's be competitive. And there was always a game to be had. That's really where the seed probably is first born, where the love of sports because of the competitiveness comes out. And then as I get into Little League and then middle school and high school, you really start to fall in love with the games. And probably early on for me, it was basketball and maybe baseball, and then later on football. And football is what I had the opportunity to play in college along with throwing the javelin. But I think my experience in high school really, my mindset was recognizing I probably wasn't going to go to the NBA or the NFL. And so what was the thing that could prolong my proximity to sports the longest? And the lens in which I saw that was through a coach.
Yes.
And so because at my high school in Louisiana is a very small high school, Basile, Louisiana, and the coach drove the bus, taped the ankles, and was the AD. And so there was no such thing as an athletic department. So my lens in which how I prolonged my proximity was through the ability to coach. So that's what I thought I wanted to do. So I went to college at Northwestern State in Natchitoches, Louisiana. And for the first time ever, even though it was a smaller school, they had a department. They had a marketing team and a compliance team and academic support and an AD. And I was like, it was like a world that was open to me that I never thought it was like, oh my gosh, these people exist. I didn't know.
Right.
And then the other thing I would say is, I had an incredible mentor and example as an athletic director at Greg Burke. And what I've said as we talk about, diversity and how that's important, I saw a person who looked like me in a position that I admired and wanted to be in. And I think that moment for me has helped me as I think about diversity on our teams and our staff, because I want that same opportunity for everyone in our program, our student athletes who may not look like me as a white male, to see people in our department and leaders in areas of leadership that may be surprising to them to think, man, that's something I can do. And so, but that's what happened to me is I saw someone who inspired me to think differently about my career because they were, one, good at their job, but they also looked like me. And I think that's important as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion. And so anyway, I changed my major, shifted some things up so that I could get a master's degree in sports administration from Northwestern State. Was able to do that, played football there, threw the javelin, and then started looking for jobs all over the country and had an opportunity to go to the Southland Conference office to be an intern. And it was an incredible experience. I jokingly tell people I learned two things there. Now, I learned a whole lot more than two things, Van, but but I jokingly tell people I learned two things. One, that the conference helps to understand that you're the decision for the greater good, right? What is in the best interest of the cohort or the organization. The second thing I learned is I didn't want to work in a conference office anymore. I enjoyed being on campus. I love the energy. You know, you walk into a conference office on Monday, half the teams won, half the teams lost.
Yeah.
And you know, I loved the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of the on-campus life. So started applying for my full-time job, first full-time job all over the country. I had an opportunity to go to Lake Charles, Louisiana, and McNeese. It was an entry-level position, working my tail off, thinking I'd be there 3, 4, 5 years, go somewhere else, work my way up. And I was honestly, in many ways, probably very undeserving, but highly grateful that at the young age of 25, I got the opportunity to be an athletic director. I was named interim AD when the AD that was there announced his retirement. I think I believe that mainly why that happened is because I intersected at a person who was not part of kind of the old garb. I was an outsider, but I'd been there long enough to where people were familiar with me. And so I was very blessed. And I would tell you, I mean, I think back on that time, there were thousands of people that were way more qualified for me than that job.
Yes.
And, you know, probably undeserving in that moment, very much so. But I would tell you, I felt that way even in the moment and felt like I had to earn it every day. And so what became maybe undeserving on day one, when I left, I felt like I had at least earned maybe the approval that had happened 6 years before.
Right.
And so it was like a constant state of approval that I felt like I had to earn up to. And in many ways, I've tried to approach every job I've had that way, as though it's like, you know, getting the job is not finishing in, you know, that's not the finish line. The finish line is the task.
Yes.
You know? And so it's like, I felt like it was more of like a race. If I go back to my track days, like getting the job was being entered into the event. Now, what are you going to do with it?
With it, right.
So, and so for me, it was like, I've approached every job that way. So I was at McNeese for about 6.5 years or so, had an incredible opportunity to go to Louisiana Tech as the athletic director, was there 7 years. It was a great experience, an incredible town, wonderful community, and had the opportunity to go from Louisiana Tech as the AD to go to Vanderbilt as the deputy and work for Candace Lee, who, in my opinion, is not even a question. She's the best athletic director in the entire country, and is doing a remarkable job there. So fortunate to have a chance to work for her. And then I would say this: Vanderbilt, like Rice, has the opportunity to change the outcomes of people's future. They unlock doors that they cannot otherwise be unlocked. And it's by nature of their kind of elite academic nature. Although I did not go to Vanderbilt, it did for me what it has done for countless student athletes. It unlocked a door for me that I would not have otherwise gotten. And that was the door to get the chance to come to Rice as a vice president. I'm a kid from South Louisiana who grew up on a farm, whose father was a first generation college student. And I was not a straight A student by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm now a vice president at Rice. I feel extremely grateful, very privileged. And as I mentioned earlier, I've just been entered into the event. Now I have to go win the race.
Right, right. And I think that is an amazing perspective. And man, you touched on so many points, but I think, you know, looking back on my life, having the opportunity to play college football, but then to be drafted, I remember having that same thought that, okay, now you're in the NFL, now what? Yes. And I remember thinking some of my teammates who had been in the NFL for short times, they didn't have that attitude, and you could see it. You could see it how they, in the way they worked. And so I made a decision during that moment in my career that, no, I'm going to always be grateful for this opportunity, and I'm going to always be pushing, because, you know, we say it all the time. When you're in a place, you want to leave it better, right? Yeah. When you're doing something, you want to leave it better than you found it. And so I took that as a player, that I want to leave this team better than I found it. Of course, they had many great players, much more talented than I, but I left there and I took the same approach in my coaching role. So I think those are great. That's a great perspective that you have. So the next place that I want to go is core values. And so here at Kansas State, we talk to our guys about discipline. We talk about commitment. We talk about toughness. We talk about being selfless. And those are, so we give awards to guys when they exhibit those traits, when they exhibit those values. What I would like to know is what are your values and how do they go into your operation as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, things that are important to me is honesty, hard work, and trust. You know, and so I would say it's like, it's very hard when a person becomes intentionally dishonest. Well, just dishonest, right? Dishonesty most of the time is intentional, but dishonesty is really, really hard. You break the circle of you know, you've told a lie either out of convenience or whatever the issue is. So honesty is incredibly important. Integrity is also just ultimately at the end of the day, what are you going to be a person of your word? Are you going to say what you're going to, are you going to do what you say? You're going to follow through. And, you know, as I've learned over the years, a lot of people can be the captains of the ship whenever it's calm seas, but when the storm comes, do you hide from your responsibility? Do you stand up to the pressure? Do you have a North Star that is more that has more power to pull than the pull of whatever the distraction is? And, you know, in my career, there have been many times where I've been faced with those dilemmas, right? It's a real life kind of study of ethics, if you will. And I always am grateful for them, even though I don't like them, because it's a reminder that my North is still there.
Right.
You know, that the pull for truth is still there. So honesty, loyalty, and hard work. You know, the hard work piece is just like, hey, are you committed? Like, are we just punching in or out? Like, again, and I'm not saying like that we're judging people based on, are they just spending long hours? Because we do want to work smart, and I want people to have time with their families. I'm a family person as well. But when it's time to work, we have to work. We've got to get into work. There's a task to be done, and we have to be committed and focused to that. The fourth thing that I would add to that is we also have to enjoy our time together, right? We're going to spend probably more time with these people we work with than our own family at times. It doesn't mean that we can't disagree. It doesn't mean that we can't have arguments or different opinions. But gosh, man, you got to like each other, right? That we can be in a room, that we can enjoy each other's company. So to me, it's honesty, loyalty, integrity, hard work, and have fun. You know, I think those are the things that kind of in general that I think about. That's really what I want to surround myself with, is people that have those same similar viewpoints. But it's also what I want to project.
Right. And then the last point that you made, having fun and enjoying the process. You and I, this world we live in, we get to work at a game. You
Yeah.
know, it's a thing that people come from all over and they watch from all over the world. It's a game, and it's a very competitive, and it's high stakes, but it's a game, you know. And I think it's so important. The last thing that you said, I remember working with Joe Kynes, and Joe and I worked together at Texas A&M, and Joe talked one day toward the end of his career about the importance of what you said, family. And he said, you know, they only gonna have one dad. You know, you're gonna work at a lot of schools, but they're only gonna have one dad.
Yeah.
And you're gonna coach a whole lot of players, but you're only gonna have one son, you know. And that moment that you have with your kids as they grow up, you know, a lot of people they miss out on their kids growing up. They miss choir rehearsals, and they miss football and soccer games. And I always kind of joke that, you know, while I was raising someone else's kid, I'm kind of missing out on ours. And so I always try to make a commitment that when I'm home and when I'm with my kids and when I'm operating in the mode of father, that's where I am. You know, as stressful as this job that we have, as stressful as it is, you have to be where your feet are. And that's big time important. A second ago, you alluded to a couple of leaders in your life. Well, that's exactly where I want to go is who are the people? Who are the people from a leadership standpoint who have impacted you? And what are some of the lessons that they gave you that you carry with you today?
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, first of all, we'll probably start with my being led by the Holy Spirit. I mean, hopefully I'm trying to be obedient to, you know, where the Lord would lead me each and every day. I think as it relates to professional, you know, Candace Lee is, I mean, she's really the only athletic director that I spent significant time with in a level of executive leadership. I, for a brief moment, was under the leadership of a guy named Sonny Watkins, who was the athletic director at McNeese before I took over. But I only worked with him for about 9 months, and it was at the very last 9 months of his career. Yeah. And he is an incredible man of integrity. He has since passed, but he was an incredible man. But it was just a brief moment in time. And again, it was towards the end of his career. Candace, by far, is that. But Greg Burke, who was the AD at Northwestern State and was there until about 2 years ago, is someone that I look to as a great mentor and leader. And then there have been others that I maybe early on in my career were peers with, you know, around the conference table in the Southland Conference or even Conference USA, that although I was maybe a peer, I was looking to them as guys that were examples and leaders, guys like Bobby Williams at Sam Houston State and Robert Hill at SFA and Brad Teague at Central Arkansas. In Conference USA, guys that were peers with me at Ren Baker and Brian White and Jeremy McLean and so many others that, although they're probably in my same age category, I look at them as people that I'm learning from as well.
Yes. So you've had an opportunity, and of course, in your role, you get opportunities to add people to your team, add people to your bus, is what we like to say. When you are looking to add someone to your team, what are the qualities that you look for to bring someone on and to be a part of your program?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the skill is always, you know, subject to what the task is, you know, I mean, whether it's their external, internal, you know, whatever. But again, going back to those other things, I mean, are they loyal? Do they have integrity? Do they work well with others? I mean, ultimately there's some fundamental things that allow a person to be successful. Like, can they learn? You know, I mean, have they shown the ability to grow in the jobs that they've had before while they're going to take on new tasks? And I think it's important as you're building a team, to your point, you mentioned the bus model, but like making sure that everyone that's on the bus that needs to be on the bus is on, and then they're making sure they're in the right seat. And over the years, whether it was me going to Louisiana Tech or Vanderbilt, I'm still assessing things here, but I've identified really good employees that I've kept on the bus, but moved them to a different seat. And it felt like they themselves began to thrive. And then also the department was better off for it. So still in that assessment piece here, but I think it's, that's the job of discernment, of knowing where people's strengths are, where can they best serve the organization. But again, it goes back to, you can't tolerate distrust and people that lack work ethic, lack integrity. Those are core things that I can't coach, and that you probably, you at this point in your stage of life, you're either a person that's honest or not. And those are things that are important as you're building a team. It's no different than a coach. You're building, whether you have a coaching team and then you have the players, trust is really important, because there's going to be stress and there's going to be pressure on that situation. And we have to trust one another as we go through that.
Okay. This question is always a cool question for me, because I get varied answers. And being a former athlete, you know what it feels like to go through you know what it feels like to win, and you know what it feels like to lose. You know what it feels like to have a big game. You know what it feels like to have game day. Well, in this role that you have today, what I'd like to know is what is game day for you like today in this role? What is game day? What is that thing that lights you up, like when you were throwing the javelin?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, game day is always still game day, by the way. Even as an AD, I would tell you coaches probably don't want to hear this. I think it's worse as an AD, because here's the deal. I played, and at some variation I've coached, not as a collegiate coach, but I've coached my son or whatever. And then I've been the AD. The AD position is by far the worst. You're responsible for the outcome, and you have zero to do with the game.
Right.
You can't, as a player, if I knew that I gave my best and our team prepped and they beat us, there was a lot of like, hey, man, dadgum, good job, guys, shake their hands. And then as a coach, you can influence the outcome of the game somewhat based on how you manage time or maybe what plays you call.
Right.
Gosh, you can't do anything as an AD. But yes, game day is still game day. But I know what you're asking. And I think for me, graduation is a sense of that. I've always talked to places I've been using kind of the philosophy of we're developing champions in the classroom, on the field court, and then in life. And so for me, it's really in those three areas that I have experience or experiential game days. So to me, a kid walking across the stage and earning a degree, it's like a championship, and we're going to celebrate it. And I think then again, the analogy of it being game day or maybe a championship cutting down the net, those are very specific and understandable. And then it's those things in life. I'm now getting older and older, and I have people that, whether they were at Louisiana Tech or whether they were at McNeese, they're having kids, and I see them on Facebook, and they're doing things in life that are just, I'm so proud of them. They're leading in companies, they're coaching on teams, they're making a contribution to society. And I know, because I know them, that they were well trained in the classroom for the rigor that they're going to face, and that they were well trained by the coaches for the leadership that's required. And so that, to me, those are those championship moments, is being able to kind of get those windows of opportunity where you see someone later on and you're like, golly, man, that person is doing that or whatever. I always knew they would be successful. It's funny to me. I was talking to an NFL executive not too long ago, since I've been here, and we were talking about a former student athlete at Louisiana Tech. And they say, yeah, I missed on that one. I actually told our GM we didn't need to draft him. I said, well, you should have called me, because I could have told you they were never going to fail, that they had what it takes. And it's a kid that's still competing in the NFL right now. Yeah. And it's the things that they were watching film. If they'd have called me, I could have told them about DNA.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the point you make, which I see it as a coach, is you get an opportunity to have relationships with your student athletes. Of course, I do as well as a coach, and you can see what won't show up on the film in a good way and in a bad way.
In a bad way. It goes both ways.
I've had incredible talents, but I knew, man, this guy's not there yet. He's not ready. And so for me, yes, it's game day for sure. Just like you, it's game day. It's what happens on Saturdays. But then it's even more than that for me, because I get an opportunity to see player A. He comes in, you know, you got to get him to go to class. You got to get him to be on time. You got to get him to do some of these things that for another player are just natural things to do off the field to take care of your business. Well, then all of a sudden it clicks for this guy who is jacking everything up in his non-football life. It clicks with him, and then he becomes that leader. Then he becomes all those things that you wished for him to be when he was messing it all up, you know. And so again, yes, game day, they are, man, they're great, but that is where I get a lot of gratification as well, because I get to see those players who come in young and dumb,
Mm-hmm.
and to watch them grow and mature. Speaking of growing and maturing, how do you motivate young staff members, right? You got a young staff member, a person on your team with great potential. How do you motivate staff members who are young, kind of like I talked about with that player?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think one, just like a coach, you have to know your players, and what motivates one kid might not motivate the other. So there's always making sure. Some people want to be really, some people can kick in the rear end. Some people need the pat on the back, right? So, but what is it that motivates them? And you know, I don't expect every person in a department to say, "Hey, I want to be an AD." I think if that's their goal, then my objective is, and I tell our staff, I've told every one of them as I've met with everybody in this building since I've been here, is what is your goal? I mean, because number one, if you don't have a goal, then we need to create one. I mean, because your goal can't just be coming here and punching a clock, right? I mean, that's not the goal. And so what is your goal? And let's dream. If it's being an AD, great. If it's being an SWA, great. If it's a deputy AD, great. If it's, you know, going to the professional ranks, whatever. But let's set a goal, and then let's build out a plan to help you achieve that. And, you know, athletics is uniquely positioned. I was talking to a donor one time, and he was like, "Hey, where, you know," I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to meet with you. I'm going to a conference." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, it's like an AD's conference. What do you do?" I said, "Well, we network, we help each other." He said, "Man, that would never exist in my industry." He's like, I am not trying to help anyone in my organization in any way, shape, or form to go get another job, even if it's a better job. Our industry is cutthroat. Everybody has a contract. They have don't competes. They have all these things. And I think it's one of the things I had never thought about that's unique about the athletic industry is whether it's a coach or administrator, we're striving to give them the best opportunity of what they want.
Yes.
And so that would be, what is it that I motivate them is I want them to have a plan for themselves professionally. And then I want to work with them on helping them achieve it. Because I think when people feel like you're invested in their professional strategy, there's a better work production that occurs because they feel like they're part of a team.
Right. You a couple of times I'm a big leadership book reader, and a couple of times you've mentioned ideas that I've read in books. You know, we talk about the bus. The Energy Bus is one of those books read. But actually, we had the author of the Energy Bus, John Gordon, on this podcast.
Oh, wow.
But great ideas in that book. And then the fact that we as leaders, players or coaches, whatever it might be, there's a dynamic that is, like you said, kind of unique to athletics, where the leader is there to serve the people who work, would say they work for the leader. You know, it's about serving them to allow them to help them to get to the places that they would want to achieve or obtain, because somebody helped you, right? Now, this final question, well, I actually have two. I got a question about NIL from your position, from your place. What does NIL, what does that look like for you? What does that look like for Rice University?
Yeah, I mean, well, it looks like it does everywhere else in the country. I mean, it's permissible, it's legal. We need to be participatory in it. We talked about that at my press conference. And well, we're, to the extent we can and that we're allowed to legally, we're supporting it to the full extent. So I'm supportive of it. I think we'd all agree that we probably would like maybe a little bit of standardization that is still beneficial to the student athlete while also creating a little bit of structure. Is having been in the SEC the last 3 years, I can tell you it is the wild, wild west. And even each individual school that is there does not want it to continue the way it is. It's just that they don't have a choice. They
Right.
have to participate that way. And so I think at Rice, we're trying to be thoughtful about how we do it, but recognizing we have to. And
Right.
so we're moving into, creating a platform, if you will, of whether it's from the direct side of intake of revenue to the student athletes from an NIL standpoint, but also supporting them in financial education and other ways to making sure that they're not just receiving money, but they're being prepared on how to deal with that. But yeah, I think it's a new era of college athletics. Anyone that thinks or hopes that it is not going to be this way or that it's going to change is naive. And so we need to collectively move forward. But I do think we need to move forward and tighten up ourselves as we move together. It doesn't seem sustainable in the current model, but I'm all for continuing to support our student athletes in the way they deserve to be supported financially.
Yeah, and the reason that I pose that question is because I would know that you would be a thoughtful leader in that way. What I personally believe, and I think what our stance is just like yours, is that there are incredible benefits for our student athletes in the NIL space, but we have to put some guardrails. We have to have parameters. We have to educate our student athletes on what's coming next, right? When you get money, you got to pay taxes on it, right?
Yeah.
If I've never paid taxes, I don't understand that whole, why would we put a student athlete in that ignorant position, right? It's best for us to be able to educate
Or to put them in a hole. I mean, you put it's something that should be a positive.
Yes.
Listen, I had to learn that. The first time I was 31 years old, I guess, the first time when I went to Louisiana Tech, and they paid half my salary out of the foundation. I didn't even know what that meant. And then at the end of the year, I got a 1099 on that money, and I took a bath, and I had no idea that I should have been like I was a grown man with kids.
Right.
You take that I was 31, take that and put that on a 19-year-old, and they think, oh, I got whatever the amount is, 2,500 to 25,000 to 250,000.
Yes.
They think they have 250,000. No, you
Right.
don't have 250,000.
Right.
And you go put. So yes, I think understanding, what would be perceived as a positive if you go out and spend the 250, you're then going to owe at minimum of $780,000, $90,000. And if you spend it, then all of a sudden you have a bill of 90 as opposed to a positive of what would have been. And
Right.
so I think it's absolutely right that we've got to be, and that student athletes aren't taken advantage of. We've read horror stories of kids being promised things and then they don't happen. And I think that's terrible. I mean, in a day and age where the whole reason we're doing NIL, so we're not taking advantage of students, but it's also naive to think that there's not going to be bad actors in the space. Anytime there's money involved, you're going to have people that come in to get their hands on the money.
Exactly. So my final question, this one is also a cool one, and it actually is quite thought-provoking. But what I would ask you is, you talk back to young Mr. Tommy McClellan. What would you tell that dude, right, about how he was acting, about how he was perceiving life, about anything that you know now that you wish
How young?
someone would have told you then?
What age as young McClellan?
Yeah.
Which young McClellan am I talking to?
That guy, he was a different guy at different points, huh? How about the guy early in your career?
Yeah, so young AD just got the job. You know, I've been asked before, you know, what would I think the question is, and I thought of that. What would I tell my 25-year-old young AD self? I've actually rearranged the question of what would I tell my son if he was in the same exact position? So if Grayson or Lawson McClellan was at McNeese and they got offered the AD job at 25, I would say, hey, this is a blessing and a curse. And gratefully, they would have me, hopefully, for guidance along the way. What happens when you become a young leader is well, at least what happened to me is I spent so much time. I realized, like, oh my gosh, I got this job. I need to go accomplish some things. I realized there was no accomplishments. And so I spent the next 3 or 4 years really trying to make sure it's working to trying to get accomplishments. And I had a presidential change. And it was a realization that I had no mentors. I had no one that was pouring into me because I never worked for the likes of Joe Castiglione or Kevin White or, you know, Mike Alden. I never worked for any of these titans of the industry that were championing all their other ADs that were in these roles. And so I wind up reaching out and making some friends and having some mentors. But I always, in the back of my mind, realized that I was like their adopted mentee. I was not real. I'd never worked for them. They were going to support me as long as their guys weren't involved in the search, as long as their guys didn't need them first, or girls or whoever. Right. But so I would just tell my son, hey, you can't pass up this opportunity because very few people get the opportunity. You're going to work really, really hard every day to earn it. Just like we talked about, you've been entered into the race. Now you need to go win. But you need to also be very intentional about developing some mentorships and some colleague friendships that are going to form you along the way. It's like an old saying that I heard once. It's vision plus hard work. It's hard work and vision. And so the vision part is being connected to mentors and colleagues and friendship to create a vision. The hard work is doing the job every day. If you just simply dream, you live a life of fantasy. Mm-hmm. If you just simply work hard, you live a life of futility. But if you combine vision and hard work, that's where great things can be accomplished. You can't do one without the other. I mean, you can, but one is just fantasy land and the other one is just futile because there's no vision for where you're going. And so that's what I would say to my younger self is make sure that you're working hard while creating a vision for yourself.
I think that's a great thought to look at even from the flip side. And I'm quite seasoned now as a coach. I've been doing this for a while. And I think that there are many young coaches out there who are looking just like you were as a young administrator for someone to help them, to guide them, to lead them. And so I take every opportunity, which is kind of why we do this, you know, to take every opportunity to help people who are out there looking for direction, looking for people, because there are honestly, and you know this in your roles, there are some people who are not willing to help anybody, like that person that you talked about. They're not willing to help anyone. And then there are other people who always do things like this. There are other people who you can cold call and say, I got a question, and they'll help you well beyond what you even asked for. And so I think, again, that's great advice for your sons. But then when you look at it from the opposite side, is that we have a responsibility to do all that we can to be there for people who are like your young self, looking for mentorship, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what was I supposed to do? Turn down the McNeese job? I mean, I got offered a Division I job.
Yeah.
And, you know, so the answer is no, but, you know, and it's a good challenge, right? To other people who are in a position of leadership where someone finds themselves in that young role to go insert, because there are pitfalls there. I was grateful I didn't hit them.
Yeah.
But there were pitfalls there that could have derailed my career before it ever started.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Tommy, I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. The agreement that we have is that we're going to get you in and get you out. And this was a pleasurable experience to be able to meet you, to be able to talk to you, to be able to gain valuable insight from you. And, you know, the great thing about this podcast is that, man, people all over are checking it out, from coaches to young administrators. And again, I talk about Pat and the team twisting my arm to do it, but that was only at the start. Once I started to hear the responses and people grab me to say that they're learning and they're gaining from these podcasts, it's because of people like you taking their time out to give to others that continually have made it work. And so I appreciate you and I thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.